Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to this wonderful plant. In fact, it is a plant that I absolutely adore because it grows everywhere here in the kingdom, that is County Kerry. All around me here on stone walls. And in fact, it's incredibly nutritious, it is delicious, and it has a long-standing history and tradition in herbal medicine. This little plant is called Navelwort. So its modern Irish name is Cornán Caisil, which basically means small coil of the wall. Now, interestingly, I was looking into an older book by a guy called John Cameron, and he actually spells it as Cornán Caisil, and that would make more sense because Cornán actually, rather than meaning coil, means a drinking horn or a cup or a plate. So these are the little plates or the little cups of the stone walls. So just as its name describes, it grows on stones, rocks, and the familiar stone walls across the Irish landscape. But strangely enough, like many other plants in Ireland, it skips most of Europe and ends up in the southern parts of the continent to even reach North Africa. Navelwort is fleshy and juicy, just like the rest of the Crassulaceae family. In fact, it is called a stone crop, and stone crops tend to be classed as succulents. And a succulent is any of these crunchy, juicy, textured leaves that you can generally tend to eat. Now, on account of its absolutely satisfying crunch and its tantalizing bitterness, it is a perfect addition for a wild salad, especially a wild spring salad with a little bit of balsamic vinegar. You get a nice mix of bitterness and sweet and sour and a little dab of salt. Oh, unbelievable. So Dioscorides actually indicated this plant as an anti-inflammatory on account of its moistening and cooling qualities. So anything that's red, hot, inflamed, and probably quite painful. So he actually mentions chilblains, and he also mentions a burning stomach, which probably basically means indigestion. Now, another interesting use for it was actually the whole plant. So they used the leaves and the olive-shaped roots, and they would have mixed this in with wine, either grinded it in or decocted it with wine, and drank it to help cure or get rid of kidney stones or urinary gravel. Another name for this plant is actually kidney weed or kidney wort on account of its actions on the kidneys. Like obviously, as I mentioned earlier, they were used to treat urinary gravel and to cause diuresis. And another use was actually to mix it in with mead. And when they mixed it in with mead, they would have used that for edemas. And again, on account of its diuretic action and the whole kidney link between water retention. Now, another interesting thing that Dioscorides does say is that this little plant was actually used in love potions. So another Irish name for the plant is Lawan Cat Leachin, the hill cat's glove, which I'm not quite sure what it means. I mean, I don't think it quite looks like a glove either, but I suppose you could, I don't actually know why it's called that. Ah well. Now, funny enough, in Ireland, it was also used to treat chilblains and also corns. And this would have been done by applying it directly as a poultice on the wounds or by mixing it with goose fat. Now, in County Wicklow, it was used to treat tuberculosis, and in Waterford, it was used to treat jaundice. And to be fair, I understand why this is a case, because as you'll hear later, there is actually antibacterial activity. And on the account of its bitterness, it does probably have an action on the liver. Bitter usually is linked with liver processes. So Parkinson's describes this plant in his Theatrum Botanicum, and in fact he describes the Western energetics as cold and moist, somewhat astringent and a little bitter, which I would personally agree with because it is bitter, but not to a point that you can't eat it. And I like that because as a food, it's important to have these bitter foods in your diet, but they need to be palatable, of course. And so in that, he used to use it to treat inflammation of the intestines and the liver. But beyond this, for anyone with pain linked to heat or an excess blockage of blood flow, he also added to Dioscorides' indication by stating that it's useful for hemorrhoids and gout, which are both, quite inflammatory conditions and quite drying as well. Now, interestingly, he also claims that it helps relieve sciatica when applied topically to reduce the swelling. Now, there's probably some truth in that. If the sciatica is linked to, I suppose, a trapped nerve due to inflammation. And I also find in Pliny's texts that Navelwort was used to help treat eye ailments. Now, to be honest, I have no idea what that means, what it was used for specifically, but it's all I could find. And on a pure anecdotal note, a good friend of mine who's a practitioner in Cork, who has experience with the plant, claims that it is one of the only herbs in Europe that is actually useful and specific to the small intestines. Now, obviously there are other plants that work with the digestive system, but there's none that we know of, I suppose, or that I know of anyways, that is quite specific to the small intestines. And I find that really interesting. I'd love to do more research on that and see where and how I could apply it in clinic. It was used by physicians in the 18th and 19th century actually as an anticonvulsive, and this can be found in the American dispensatory among a few other of the American literature. Anecdotally, I was told that it could be mixed with lavender and skullcap for convulsion-related conditions. Now, what the American dispensatory says is that you wouldn't want to dry these plants, because if you were to leave them in your room after drying them, or if you powdered them, it would not only attract moisture, which is good, because you could essentially use it as a dehumidifier, but it actually would let out a fishy smell, quite a strong odour coming out of that. So there was a study made to determine the nutritional and potential medicinal value of Navelwort, and what they discovered was very interesting. Despite this plant now falling into disuse, it actually has incredible nutritional value on account of its proteins, its fatty acids such as omega-3, its organic acids such as malic acid, oxalic acid, and even ascorbic acid, being vitamin C. It also has vitamin E in it, and also a whole pile of biologically active flavonoids. And in fact, these flavonoids have been seen to scavenge free radicals, so they actually are quite powerful antioxidants. So the test that they have done was using a tincture and also a decoction. And what they discovered was the decoction actually had more biological action when it came to scavenging free radicals than the tincture. But they said both were pretty much good as each other in other ways. What they also discovered was that Navelwort is bacteriostatic, or antibacterial if you may. And this was against both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. So this means that Navelwort would actually be useful for wounds. Say you were out and you cut yourself and there was Navelwort around you, you could mash it up, put it on your wound and use it as an antiseptic. Isn't nature wonderful? What did come up in this study is that the anti-inflammatory scores came out very low. In fact, so low that it didn't quite match up with the empirical data, suggesting that it can be used as an anti-inflammatory. But these scientists actually did admit that this test that they used, or these tests that they used, were not done on living beings or on even live cell cultures, which isn't really a fair assessment. In effect, what they're suggesting is that it should be looked into a little bit more, and at the end of the day, you should look at the empirical data and also see how it works. Put it on your chilblains and see if it actually improves or helps a condition or soothes them in any way. Now, what they did say was that Navelwort is an incredible nutritious food, and that it is such a pity that it has fallen out of use. Now, what I find most interesting about this plant is that it was used to inspire love. And it wasn't just Dioscorides who was saying that you could use it in a love potion, but the Romans used it for that purpose, and they actually named it Venus's navel. And there's other accounts in France, Poland, other parts of Europe of it having been used as a love potion. Now, it's not an aphrodisiac, so what it can mean is that it's got some special magical powers that may make someone fall in love if they're to eat it. So maybe I'll eat this and fall in love myself, or maybe if I give it to someone, they'll fall in love with me. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope you learned a lot about Navelwort, and that if you someday meet the plant out in the wild, you will taste one or two of the leaves. Now, it's always important that if you're out there and you're foraging, to make sure that you actually know the plant and you have ID'd it correctly, that it's not something else that you're going to poison yourself with. Another thing that's important is that you've got plenty of the plant around you. Like here, we have loads and loads of Navelwort, so I can happily take 10% of what's around here without causing too much trouble. But in some spots where it's maybe sparse, I wouldn't actually harvest anything. And another rule is only take what you need for that day. If you're making a salad at home and you're making a wild salad, some dandelion leaves and some bits of chickweed like this, and add it in and make some vinegar, or vinaigrette, sorry, and have a little bit of food, well, be my guest, but don't over harvest. And anyways, if you do over harvest and it dries up, your house will end up smelling fish anyways, so you don't want to do that. So if you like the video, give me a like on YouTube or follow me on Instagram and all that shebang. I do have a Patreon if you do wish to help me on my journey and on my research. I do a lot of things with translations at the moment of these French herbal doctors, and now that I'm more settled in Kerry, I'll be doing more videos, all going well. So thank you very much for listening and have a wonderful day.